The original version of the script was written less than a week after I finished the game for the very first time. For this review, I did go through an ad and cut a little to bring it up to date with my current views on the game, although they haven't changed all that much. I will try to differentiate when needed between younger me and current me as of 2026. It's not an understatement to say that despite being overshadowed by Mario and Link, Samus and her adventures have had an enormous impact on the gaming space, particularly in the indie-developed renaissance we are currently experiencing. It has never been a better time to be a Metroidvania fan, but in a market saturated with excellent examples of the genre, can the progenitor of the style compete? Can a game with 15 years of expectation live up to the hype? I was pretty nervous, maybe even dreading that Metroid 5 would not live up to the impossibly high expectations I had put upon it. But first, some history. Metroid 4, or Fusion as it's better known, was released in 2002, and a true sequel has been a long time coming. We have indeed had a few games in the series since then, a couple of excellent remakes, and the much disfavored Other M. Personally, I did not hate Other M, but it was much more of a sequel to Super Metroid specifically than a continuation of the series, and it will never completely live up to the legacy of the other 2D games in the series. The announcement of Dread first happened in 2006. I still remember seeing concepts for Dread on forums and getting really excited, only to slowly realize the game was just never going to happen. Then, miraculously, a trailer dropped. I was over the moon excited, but also a little worried. I mean, Mercury Steam had done a good job for sure, but I would not call Samus Returns an all-time great. Something was just missing, at least for me, and I was worried that Dread would not be able to live up to the hype or expectation. Hey, it's current me again. As a side note, my daughter loves Samus Returns, and as I've mentioned before and will continue to mention through this video, she's the queen of Metroidvanias and completes all these games that she can find. So do not let my old foginess put you off of that game. It's very solid, and I still hope for a remake/re-release on the Switch, and the only reason it doesn't have a review on this channel is because I can't record footage for it. But if they did release it on the Switch, that would make all the mainline Metroid games and their remakes playable on one console. So, Nintendo, I know you're probably not listening, but get on it. I got my copy of Dread a little late as a birthday present to myself and sat down to play it. I should also mention that I completed the game for the first time on the Switch Lite. As mentioned, my daughter is a huge fan of Metroid and Metroidvanias in general, and since I was going to play it first, I did not want her to be subject to too many spoilers. So being a good dad, I played on the portable. I will go ahead and say I do not think this was the way the game was designed to be played, and it largely handicapped my experience based on the small size of the character on screen and the size of my hands being a factor with the small buttons and stretched layout. I have giant hands. But these issues are hardly the fault of the developer, and in spite of them, I'm happy to report that Dread did not disappoint even on the tiny screen. Current me again. I have replayed the game several times since that initial run on a large screen, and my most recent run through can be watched over on my Let's Play channel. I'll pop a link in the description. You can feel the DNA of the whole franchise in this one game. The most obvious influence is Samus Returns, of course, as the omnidirectional aiming returns as well as the melee counter, but the large cohesive world of Super also makes its presence known, and the environments really shine. The ambiance rivals even the Ori series, with constant little touches in the backgrounds of scenes. It truly is the first time since Super that Metroid captured that cohesive world feeling. It really does feel alive, and in some cases, I wish I could explore down corridors in 3D environments because the locales were so fully realized. The only thing holding back the game in this department is the inconsistency of fluid transitions from area to area. Elevator and train rides are just a bit too long, and even moving from one area of the map to another can sometimes take a few seconds. These would be nitpicks, of course, if Ori and other games like it did not closely match the game's richness of environments, yet still managed to seamlessly, for the most part, transition from area to area. Current me again. This may be improved if you're playing on a Switch 2, but I cannot attest to that. In light of games that have come out since Dread, Silksong has an absolutely enormous cohesive world map and barely has any loads at all. And I know the assets are different between 3D renders and also 2D objects, but Silksong is technically a 3D game, it's just rendered in a 2D style. I'm sure it doesn't push the hardware as hard in some ways, but it's worth mentioning anyway. That said, the maps are pretty large, and while it's difficult for me to compare them directly to any of the other games that I've mentioned, they sometimes felt bigger or more complex than was needed. I felt like snaking through areas was a bit tedious sometimes, especially when I was item hunting later in the game. Fusion's influence is the second most prevalent force in the game. It affects the game narratively, of course, being a direct sequel, but even its presentation and execution draws on the previous entry for influence. The E.M.M.I you encounter are very reminiscent of the SAX from Fusion, and instill that same level of tension when you are forced to encounter them. I was worried this mechanic would grow tiresome with so many of them running around each area, but I was pleasantly surprised by the variety sprinkled into each of these encounters. Every one of them has its own unique facet, made evident by their abilities and the terrain you encounter them in. Acquiring the Omega Cannon to take them down each time always made me sweat because while I had the power to kill one, it meant I needed to find the place to utilize the cannon without being taken out in the process. It was a puzzle, and it felt good to solve it. Each time I would charge the cannon, I was assured by the design of the environment that it would be a desperate encounter. The progression of Samus and power also plays into these encounters. Each time you grow, they grow until one final, incredibly cathartic encounter late in the game, which I'm not going to spoil. Suffice to say, though, it feels really good to take them down. Modern me, again, many of the reviewers I followed did not seem to care for the implementation of the E.M.M.I encounters, citing the one-hit game overs and hard resets as immersion breaking and feeling unfinished as a concept. None of this bothered me at the time. I was having too much fun. But on subsequent playthroughs, I can see why they feel that way. As for me, though, I do agree it's a bit immersion breaking, and the hard resets are jarring. I personally enjoy the tension that the E.M.M.I encounters bring so much, I guess I'm not as affected by that immersion break. Immersion is no doubt an important aspect of Metroid design, but so is the feeling of dread and empowerment that the E.M.M.I encounters excel at. It may not be to everyone's taste, and that's okay and even understandable. The way it's set up gets you back to the action so quickly that I feel it does a better job than Fusion and the SAX at not breaking immersion. And it's very satisfying when you pull off that counter to keep Samus alive. In short, I stand by my original assessment that the E.M.M.I is a great inclusion in the game, though your mileage may vary. Another Fusion influence is the difficulty. Hard mode is not unlocked until after you complete the game once, so I played on normal my very first time. Some of my deaths I'm sure were because of the tiny buttons, but others were just the game's bosses. They can be particularly relentless. They hit hard, and each boss encounter really feels like an event, even if a few are reused from time to time, though that doesn't bother me personally, because it meant that there were lots of bosses. This game has more bosses than any other game in the series, and none of them feel cheap, too easy, or too difficult. There are some that are better than others, and there are some that are on the lower end, but none of them are bad. In normal mode, at least, I found the game well balanced and enjoyable. I did not want the game to end when I reached the final area. Pause for modern me again. I've played on hard mode and normal difficulty pretty much exclusively since my initial run to unlock more of the game's cover art and 100% my hard file on my second playthrough. More difficulties and modes were added in later revisions, and I think that they take the difficulty a little too far, introducing one-hit KOs. It turns the game into an exercise of precision and memorization, and I'm not sure how it even I'm not sure how people even get through this mode. I'm sure some people have. They're just better at the game than I am, but I don't know, at this point, it just stops being fun for me. So I kept on playing, and I went item hunting, which is not always something I do in an initial playthrough of a game, but I was having fun and wanted more out of the game, and in the end, I was glad I put in the extra effort. It made the final encounter much easier than I think it would have been otherwise. Not to say the fight itself was easy, far from it. It stands as the most challenging final encounter in any Metroid game to date, but I'll circle back to that. Some of the collectibles are deviously hidden behind skill-based challenges reminiscent to Zero Mission. But I got them all, and it felt good to get that 100% completion mark on a save file. And again, that's not something I always do in these games. I'm not really as much a completionist mindset, but if I'm enjoying a game, I'll keep collecting stuff just so I can get more game out of it. I want to mention the standout story elements, so if you do not want spoilers, skip this section. I'll try to put like a little something in the corner to let you know that we're in spoiler territory. Ravenbeak is an incredible antagonist and foil for Samus. As I stated earlier, his final encounter rivals any Ridley or Mother Brain fight in the series. At the end of the second phase, when he rips that wing off, my jaw dropped. He just feels powerful and intimidating. The story is one of the best in the series, but I like how it really is not the focus, it's just the vehicle to drive Samus forward. Some may say it's not overly compelling, but I would argue that Metroid Other M tried and proved that a complex narrative and character development does not make a good Metroid game. That said, Dread does expand the lore in some interesting ways. Where will Samus go from here? She is the last remaining Metroid. What does that mean for the galaxy and for her? It feels like a chapter closed on the story of Samus, but also a new chapter beginning for her. In summary, I loved Dread. I loved the atmospheric storytelling, the sense of dread associated with the encounters, and the fully realized world in which the game takes place. I love the speed at which Samus moves in the game and the scope added by the zoomed out perspective. I love the art and presentation of the character and the environments, and I love the soundscape mixing of new and familiar tunes. Modern me again, seriously, the movement and control in this game might be my favorite experience ever, only rivaled by the incredible movement in Silksong. I really value movement in video games. I've said it before, one of the main things I look for is does the game make me feel like it does when I play Donkey Kong Country 2? Because the movement in that game is one of my favorites ever. And I might say that the movement and control in this game is even better. It's a joy to control and makes even the most green player feel like a pro speedrunner. If I had any critiques, it would be the excessive loads on this hardware, and with the cartridge, it really shouldn't be an issue. I understand that the Switch has a little less horsepower to play with than many of its competitors, but it stands that other games on the system with similar size and scope play seamlessly, transitioning between areas easily, and considering that most of the games in the series felt like fully realized worlds with limited loading of areas, or at most quick elevator rides, the game feels like it could be more optimized than it is. As it stands, it's one of the best in its genre, and I am loath to admit it considering the level of reverence and nostalgia I hold for Super Metroid, Zero Mission, and especially Metroid Fusion as my very first Metroid game I ever played. Today, right now, it might be my favorite Metroid game to date. Okay, modern me breaking in one last time. Today I feel pretty much the same. If you pinched me, I would say my favorite game in the series is Fusion. But Dread is right up there, and in many ways it's the only modern rival to Silksong, mainly because Silksong has so much more content. I do think Dread edges it out in player feel and control layout and movement. Silksong might be a little too big sometimes, if I'm honest, but you can feel Dread's DNA in it for sure in the movement, along with, of course, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Hopefully, Silksong will push Metroid 6 the way that Metroid 5 has clearly influenced Silksong. If that cycle continues, the real winners will be the players. Dread is amazing, and I'm excited for what Metroid 6 might bring. Maybe we won't have to wait another decade or longer for it. Thanks so much for watching this review. I have several Metroid videos on my channel, so there are links below. I have a few suggestions for the story of Metroid 6, so if you want to check out that video, here's a link. Look for a Dread versus Super Metroid video in the future on this channel as I put the two head to head to see objectively as best I can which one is best. Also, check out the other links in my description, like my Patreon, if you'd like to support this channel and the content I make. I've also got a few books published on Lulu.com of the science fiction variety. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, and maybe since you're watching a Metroid video, you might go check out those as well. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.